all these different services that the state was providing. Yet, through their recovery court and utilizing the problem-solving court method, they have been able to reduce their costs extensively. But moving aside from just the cost for a second, a lot of those individuals now have reintegrated into society and have jobs, are very, very successful people, and so we wanted to support the use of problem-solving courts in other municipalities as well.
Yes, I would like to know about the Third Amendment to the Constitution and what does it have to do with criminalization of homeless people. To you, Professor.
So, to be fair, we have a constitutional section of our report so that we can focus on the fact that cities are now criminalizing status, which we know from our history is unconstitutional. We have not taken a look at whether or not these ordinances violate different types of constitutional amendments or claims or statutory claims. So we really focused on sort of whether or not, when you say you can't sit here, you know, when an ordinance says you can't lay down here in this public place, you can't put a blanket on you. Really what they're doing is they're saying we are prohibiting actions that are licensing that we know you have to take as a person who lives in the public. And that's a violation based on your status of being homeless. And that's unconstitutional.
And I totally agree with you. My thing is 13th Amendment to the Constitution clearly states that slavery is abolished except for those punished for crimes within the United States, and Congress shall have the power to push that by proper legislation. So if states come up underneath federal guidelines, minimum standards, and the state is using this is not a federal thing to be homeless, and that's not a crime, a federal crime, correct? Okay, so it's a state, you know what I'm saying? So therefore, why is it that Colorado becoming one of the richest states in America due to the marijuana thing, you know, whatever. Anyway, that's where we need to focus on, because they're utilizing the, you know what I'm saying, federal guidelines to enslave people, not criminally. I mean, yeah, the crime is that's the part, but at the same time, yeah, they're still enacting slavery here in America. Am I right or wrong under the 13th Amendment to the Constitution?
Right. I'm probably not going to step into the issue of whether or not
I didn't think so.
Thank you for your point.
Okay, I'm an artist. I just got something to share. It's called Small Things. Now, why is it that these days when a stranger meets another stranger and says hello or happy holidays, it's not met with a happy holidays or with bro? It's usually met with silence, but mostly fear. What, have we lost sight of the simplest things, like a kind gesture, or asking if something's okay when we see them fall with their butter for the bus and not laugh? Now don't count me out, because I know that I'm guilty too. What, have we wore our masks so long that it clouds our real view, so we only look for the bad everywhere? What, no good can beat its way through? Now, from where I sit, or excuse me, I mean to say from my viewpoint, if we do let down these hardened things and show a lighter, or if you can, a softer side, for the ones that you let in, use it to abuse you and harm. Now, I don't know how much time's left, but if you're a God-fearing person as I am, you know the prophecies are upon us, so it looks like there's not too much. Will we be able to chisel enough away in time, or be left outside in the storm? Now, I started to decide myself, maybe it's time for me to take a look back at my own story and see how much I pulled, ripped off of my own mask to see how much good shows through.
I have two questions. So the first one is, our understanding is that the major objection to the Right to Rest Act comes from places like the Colorado Municipal League and saying that this is a matter of local control and that cities don't want to give up local control. And I think you've made the point real well throughout that this is a statewide concern. But so one of my questions is, I'm wondering, as you do this work and think about it, you know, what do you see as the real underlying, perhaps unstated reason why there is such objection to the Right to Rest Act? And the second question is, 15 or was it 16 citations for the urban camping ban doesn't sound like much. Can you comment on that? and help people understand what's really going on there. Is it that we have such a kind and compassionate city? Probably not.
So I can comment specifically on the second question, because that's a lot of the work I looked at, which is, as we've tried to emphasize time and time again, I think you're right. That's a huge undercount of the actual impact of the camping ban. But we have people who are actually cited. We don't have any time that a police officer for a move along order, or any time that the police just contact someone talking about the camping ban accident to move along, whether that was even recorded that way. So while we have only 15 actual citations, you're right, the impact is almost certainly higher than that.
If you look in the Denver City Spotlight, there's a specific breakout that focuses on kind of the disproportionality between the citations and the police contacts. So pull out the city section.
I would also say that the 1,000 trespass citations issued to homeless individuals a year in Denver might reflect that they're using a different ordinance to target some of the behavior that maybe Boulder is using their camping ban to target.
So just a time check. How much time do we have left for question and answer?
We could probably take one more.
Take one more.
Is there a line? Oh, yeah, three.
There's no five, just four.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
so if you'd like to ask a question,
We will stay as long
get
as
in
we need to
line.
stay.
Nancy's saying the first part of her question about local control. She'd like to reiterate that. But I have a question. We are out of reports. So,
It's on our website.
so what is that website? How can people?
If you Google, but if you Google DU Law School homelessness, it is the first link. Sometimes if you Google something else, the link is broken and we're fixing that. But if you Google DU Law School homeless, it pulls up our link and all of our reports, Excel spreadsheets, as well as the city spotlights are there. I think that's the easiest way to get there. Google.
Any comment on the local control versus statewide concern question?
The reason that we need the Right to Rest Act on a state level is because of the reasons that Kobe articulated, which is that the police have a wide latitude in using different ordinances to target homeless people that are out on the streets. And so knocking down one, which some courts have done, just means another one pops up. And so having a statewide protection is so necessary. We just have in Colorado, we have a reputation of local governments, right? That we sort of, we're known for that. But we also have a state constitution. That means, that we recognize the fact that there needs to be rights and protections for those underneath our state constitution and our state rights. And so we are advocating for that.
I think another part of your question went to why people oppose it. And there are different reasons, and we don't know all those reasons. But one of the reasons why we look at all the individual cities is that it shows they have their own interests, their own reasons for pushing it. Some of them care deeply about tourism. So in Colorado Springs, there was a big battle over the last few months for a sit-lie law in the downtown area. And they just passed it, unfortunately, but that goes to just their downtown areas. That's not a citywide ordinance ban. It was specifically in the two areas where there's a lot of businesses and there's a lot of tourism. Different areas in the state, Durango, Grand Junction on the west side, don't have as much of an issue as Denver and Boulder do with that. But they're more dependent on the energy market, so their homelessness fluctuates and they have limited funds for providing actual housing. So the broad overall reasons I can't say, but different cities and different businesses oppose it for their own reasons.
Let me just give you that website. It's www.law.denver.edu/homeless-advocacy-policy-project. That has the website on it, so you can pick it up there. It's in the report. Thanks.
Sure. I don't know if the
It's
mic
not gonna
will
reach.
One of the things that I noticed that does not happen when you go before a court. Primarily, you go before a magistrate, and before actually seeing the judges and representing themselves, they have to contend with a city attorney and the judge. So that's factored into your financial equation. So that's, you mentioned that when you did your financial protection. So that's skewed. Also, you have a lay person who is actually trying to arbitrate a court case, contending with a magistrate or a judge and a city attorney. Oftentimes, they don't have time to prepare for their cases, they don't know the law, and they're being, they're having to stand before the court with this judge and a city attorney looking at their criminal history. There's not representation in a systematic way. So, without taking that into consideration, some of those people get that.
Well, as you said, they're underrepresented for those reasons. And so we did.
So I might have misspoken or misunderstanding, but I do want to clarify. The number for adjudications was $174 per case, and that it does not count for any public defender that is appointed to an individual. Explicitly for the reason that this gentleman just explained, is that a lot of people do not get attorneys. They basically adjudicate their cases or go in front of a magistrate and plead out their case so that they can get out of custody. So our $174.
Representation. That's one thing that you actually don't get at that level.
So our $174 does not account for the cost. It only accounts for the city attorney as well as the judge and the court clerk's costs. We obtain that number through the city of Denver.
Hi. I'm sorry, I just want to follow up really quickly. If you want more information about home rule on municipalities and also due process and Sixth Amendment implications, the ACLU of Colorado has done a lot of work in examining constitutional implications with not having an attorney in those settings.
And I'll add one last thing that, besides the loud noise, particularly interesting is Boulder and their camping ban, which we saw has a huge number of citations. Recently, the University of Colorado's law school in Boulder has started through one of their clinics to have law students defend the camping ban for individuals who are homeless. And this is all tied into a few years ago in 2012 where they tried to change the penalty so there was no jail time, so there might not be a right to a jury trial. That was struck down, and so there's been this huge fight about the representation and what actually happens and how much the courts get clogged with these small offenses when they actually have someone to represent them who has legal training.
Hi there. I'm a 2006 graduate of the DU Stern College of Law, and I also work in the student law office. And I appreciate your interest in this incredibly complicated issue. And I have a couple of questions about the data itself. I'm just wondering, in Denver in particular, in the camping ban, if you guys looked at that, and if you noticed where it has explicit steps outlined for officers, and they have to look and they have to evaluate the medical needs, they also have to evaluate the human services needs, and the very last resort is issuing a citation. So did you guys track that in the Denver ordinance? Or are there other ordinances that look the same?
I think that's kind of the same thing that we said before, which those steps, we don't have any really accurate way to track other than, like I said, the Denver section, there's a small piece that we have a small snapshot of it. There's not a good way for us to have gotten that information through what we did.
And then I'm also interested in the disposition of the cases. I'm interested to know how many of the cases were dismissed, because I know it's a common practice in municipal prosecutors to, once the individuals come in, once they self-identified as homeless, at that point, they'll say, I want you to meet with a counselor. I want you to try to connect with some services. And once you can come back and you can prove that you've done that, we'll dismiss the charges. Did you track when that happened or how often that happened?
We did not track. We weren't able to, in the case disposition, it doesn't state if they were offered services. We did not, in our cost evaluation, count any citation that did have a dismissal because we felt that that would alter the accuracy of our numbers. We would love the opportunity to have that information. I think that that is where a level of transparency doesn't exist right now. But I think there's also, if you go out into the community, D-Hole has done some interviews that state that over 200 homeless individuals explicitly talked about multiple experiences with police officers, specifically based off of the camping ban, yet not getting a citation. So that's broken out a little bit more in the report.
I'm sorry, can I just jump in with the answer to that really quick? Because I have to know. In 2013, we did a camping ban survey of about 500 people in Colorado about the effect of the camping ban. So we asked questions about police contact, about tickets, about getting access to services, these sorts of things. You have to look at the report to get the full findings, but what it turned out to was the things that had to do with police contact, with getting moved on, with getting arrested for other charges like FTAs, those things were the highest percentages, and then the graph shrinks to at the bottom is where you have getting help in accessing a service. That happens at the bottom. It was some 2% of the people that we surveyed, or maybe it was 4%, that said that a police officer actually helped them to get some sort of service that was actually helpful to them. We could go into that in a lot more detail, but the camping ban report really shows that what's happening is being moved on and having that regular police contact and not the access to services. And Ray could probably add on to that also.
If you don't mind, I'd really like to address this. I live on the street. I get hassled probably 3 times a week. No cop comes and says, hey, why don't you come along with me? I can show you what to do. What they say is at 5 o'clock in the morning, when it's 6 degrees out, get up and move. That's what they tell us. So all this little piece of paper they have with their procedures, they don't follow any of them. None of them do. I've had a couple of them say, do you want shelter? And then they just, I've actually seen them when a guy said, yeah, I want shelter. Left them there when they left. So their procedures are nice for a website, and they look good when you hold them in the hand. What they actually do are 2 different things.
And that piece that you said that they'll dismiss your case if you've shown that you've made taking steps to try, that does not happen.
So
Absolutely does not happen.
I'm going to give her a chance to respond. Clearly, whether or not a court or a police officer offers someone a service is not the same question of whether the police officer ought to be harassing that person in the first place.
Well, thank you for addressing the question. And then just in terms of solutions, it's an incredibly complex question. The solutions are really tough. So I appreciate that you guys mentioned the recovery courts. And then just one more thing, which is the city is actually putting $47 million towards services for indigent and people experiencing homelessness this year in 2016. And so I think that rather than vilifying the cities, that using them as a partner in order to provide the services, because they're definitely committed to all members of the community, and those in need are a priority as well.
Services which are more expensive than housing. Frank?
I just wondered if you had looked into driver's license abuses by police or courts at all.
The short answer is no.
Okay. Because I am suing for that in federal court because they won't give me my driver's license back. I've already beaten them in Jeffco County Court, so they still won't give it back.
We did address that. There is a very, very small section that talks about issues with losing property because of having to leave because you can't bring it inside to a courthouse and issues like that. But we didn't examine that in depth at all.
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. With regards to the data set, did you find that most of the information that you got from the city was in a database format or was it in a written format? First, and then second, if in database format, the cost should be relatively lower because they could just send you an email.
was a total mixed bag jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So one thing that sticks out to me just thinking about it is we had one city that responded and said they weren't obligated to provide us with data in database format under the open records request statute because that's only for individual records. So if they compile any data, they don't need to turn it over to somebody under CORA or CCJRA, the two open records ordinances. There were a number of cities that gave us beautiful Excel spreadsheets that made our analysis really easy. There were cities that just gave us a list of citations and did no analysis. So it totally varies city to city, but we did get the best responses from cities that kept their data in a database already because they didn't charge us a bunch of staff time to go and pull that information. So there were a number of cities that gave us robust responses at no charge.
Great. So another time check. It is 1:20-ish. How many more can y'all handle? Two.
The last two, that'd be great.
Two. Great. Let's say three. Three.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Three, say three.
Great. Thank you for your patience. Yep.
Hi. I really appreciate the use of numbers. I'm a sociologist, so thank you for statistics. They're useful, especially if they're done right. And I'm looking forward to going into this a little bit more. The thing that kind of jumps out at me the most is that there's an intention behind these ordinances, and there's an intention to criminalize a certain group of people, obviously. I feel like when we follow the money and we follow the money trail, obviously you have to enforce these laws, right? And there's money and intention being put towards that. So who is I don't know if your information told you this, but who is backing a lot of these ordinances and giving support to that and giving power to that? Because I feel like in the same intention that you could be giving towards criminalizing folks, you could also be giving intention to giving and providing services for them. So where did you read anything, get anything about that?
As lawyers, we're very careful about placing intent,
of course,
right, on what is there. Where you could have seen that would have been if in enacting the ordinance, the city councils had some sort of legislative history, right, which they do on the state level, they do on the federal level, but not in the local level. And so if they had been a reporter that had written down what our city legislators and policymakers are saying while they are putting these into law, then we would have had that as a way of researching and then making conclusions about whether or not the intention was in line with what it seems to be.
Right.
We don't have that in Colorado. So that may be another way that we can have a more transparent government would be if the city councils did have some sort of legislation that was searchable by researchers like yourself.
Okay,
thank you. That it would be who the cities are paying to have people incarcerated.
So I just want to say Denver Homeless Out Loud through Western Regional Advocacy Project, we've been working to expose the role of business improvement districts in this national epidemic of criminalization, and there is information on business improvement districts on our website and on Western Regional Advocacy Project's websites. They're a really fascinating thing because business improvement districts take public money through a special tax, and they don't have a democratic process, but they endorse things like camping bans, like sit-lies. In fact, most of the time they're the ones to write the ordinances, and yet they don't have a democratic process to vote on which ordinance they're going to support. It's usually the people with the most amount of money within a business district. So.
Hi, thank you very much for all your hard work. In Boulder, I saw you had just the panhandling and the camping. You said there was 351 different types. Did you look into tickets for people sleeping in cars? Because that is a key issue up there.
So we did catalog those ordinances, and in some cities we requested the data about how many people were getting those citations. We didn't include it in our cost calculations because we didn't have enough information to calculate the cost of enforcing the living in a vehicle ordinances. But that information is reflected in the ordinance survey, and we did receive some open record request data about those ordinances. Yeah,
All right.
On the website.
Thank you. And last question.
You get to be last. Thank you again for all this work. As a resident of the newly termed Rhino and a graduate student at the U for social work, let's look into this. The only thing that kind of struck me as odd, and I was hoping you could kind of talk about your thought process, was in terms of public urination, defecation, with the number of bars, I know that that's not limited to homeless. However, the number of folks I've run into who are homeless would prefer not to be doing that as well. So I wondered why your solution was, that's really the only thing that actually is a health risk, not only to the house, but also to the homeless. I wondered why your solution was ban that law instead of shift that money and effort to more public restrooms and facilities, so that folks are safer and have a little bit of privacy, really.
We definitely agree with that assertion, and I apologize if we communicated that the solution to all 351 ordinances is to get rid of them. I think the solution for the public urination and defecation problem is that there need to be publicly available restrooms 24 hours a day in locations that work for people who need them. And that is not true in any of the cities we surveyed. So the problem is when you have those ordinances on the books and you write people citations and you take them to court and possibly to jail for something that they couldn't have avoided. So maybe those laws would be fine if there were restrooms, but there are not. So the problem is enforcing them when you have no other option.
If I can just jump in really quick for the, or somebody else can answer this. Just to answer that from the right to rest angle, the right to rest act does not include the right to urinate. It does not include the right to poop on people's doorsteps. The larger Homeless Bill of Rights campaign does include an effort towards opening up hygiene facilities and restrooms, but that's a part of the larger Homeless Bill of Rights campaign. The right to rest act does not say you have a right to pee outside your
And just to be clear, that's the real thing behind this bill, is we're never going to have the political will to end homelessness if we're busy violating people's rights. If we're busy trying to criminalize people, we're never going to have enough housing. We're never going to have enough public restrooms if we think the answer is to call the cops. So who is closing us out? Right. Oh, he's busy.
You're closing it. Close us out.
Give these folks. The answers? Yeah.
Okay, real quick, you guys got to give it up to these guys. What can these people do?
What can these people do? I think we all have to call our representatives and make sure that they support the Right to Rest Act that's right now in front of the House legislature.
That was the right answer. I want to bring up Robert Bowman in the back there. He's been waiting a while now. I'd like to give him up. He's a former representative of Colorado. Go ahead, give it up. And thank you guys again, please. Well,